to see the interest in our technologies. We're going to be focusing on backup recovery technology area, and we'll hit different topics every month under this group of topics. Today's topic will be on Recovery Manager and Flashback technologies. And the format that we're going to have is, I'll start with a short presentation, just to outline these two technologies. And then we will take your questions on chat. So you are muted during this session. So please use chat. Myself and my colleagues will be on the chat session. And then, we can't discuss any SRs or licensing issues. You need to speak to your support or your account team for those topics. But we're happy to talk about your use cases, technical questions you have, product questions, those kinds of things. All right. So let's go ahead and start, and we'll see how this goes. So probably many of you know about RMAN. RMAN's been around for 20 plus years. It's hard to believe, but it was introduced back in Oracle 8. Okay, so it's been growing over time. The adoption has definitely been increasing, and we have probably 80–90% of customers that we survey use RMAN. And as you know, that RMAN is the backup tool for the database, right? And it has capabilities for backing up to disk, backing up to tape or to tertiary media through a media management software. And we have Oracle Secure Backup, which is our integrated backup software, or you can choose to use NetBackup, Networker, or the assortment of various backup software applications in the market. Okay? And so these software plug into RMAN to provide the interface to the media for the backups. Now, RMAN has evolved over time, and I'll cover more of the functionality as we've gone through the different releases. But we have, not just traditional backup and recovery, but RMAN has evolved to become much more comprehensive in terms of the functionality and use cases that it can address. For example, we have many customers using RMAN duplicate and RMAN restore operations to do database cloning and to do platform migration. Okay, these are very common use cases. Customers have test dev environments. They need to move from one server platform to another server platform over some period of time. And so RMAN enables the customer to do this because at the heart of RMAN is a backup and restore engine. So the data can be restored to any other server. The data can also be converted to a different Indian platform, and that is our cross-platform migration support as well in RMAN. And we also support, obviously, other technologies within Oracle HA, or high availability area, such as DataGuard. RMAN can be used to back up both the primary and physical standby databases, and your backups in this environment can be used on either site. So you can have, because the backups are physically identical, it's the same copy of the database on the primary and standby, you can use those backups interchangeably. That's one of the beauties of the way that RMAN works. Okay. We also see RMAN used to do refreshes of the standby. Say, for example, your standby database is lagging behind. Maybe the network was interrupted, or your redo stream had an issue. When the standby comes back, you can actually use an RMAN incremental backup taken on the primary and apply that on the standby to catch up the standby much quicker than you can by doing a redo apply. Okay, so this is a sort of a incremental backup and restore, if you will, in the RMAN land, but it's a very interesting use case, right, to catch up a standby database in this manner. We also work with real application clusters to be able to do parallel backups across multiple nodes, to be able to spread workloads or allocate specific channels for the backup or restore across specific nodes. So it's very flexible in the way that you can use it for your particular needs. Now, we also have some more backup destination support, okay, for very interesting use cases. One very popular one that has been available for a 1 to 2 years now is what we call backup to cloud storage service. Okay, this will be a topic of our office hours in 2 months. Okay, we'll talk more about backup service, how you can use it. It's a very quick way for customers to get a low-cost, easy way to get a backup stored in our cloud securely, and it's off-site, right? And the backup can also be restored to various locations, not just back to your original location, but can be restored to another on-premise location, another data center, for example, or can be restored to a database cloud instance, for example, if you want to start spinning up cloud instances and doing test dev and so forth on our Oracle Cloud. So very flexible again, very low cost, and we will cover that in the April office hours session. Now, the other interesting backup support that we have is for the zero data loss recovery appliance, and this will be a focus of our session next month. The recovery appliance is a new engineered system developed by our product team to provide very, very tightly integrated, very low data loss, zero data loss, in fact, protection support, okay, for all your Oracle databases within your environment. It is meant to scale. It's meant to consolidate all your backups into a sort of very scalable performance system. And it's redundant, right? And the storage and hardware is built by our product team, who's also built Exadata. So we leverage very similar technologies underneath for running these backups across many, many databases. In some cases, our customers have thousands of databases across the enterprise, backing up to multiple recovery appliances, right? So there are various interesting features and capabilities within the recovery appliance we'll cover next month. But just keep that in your mind as we go through and obviously ask your questions on any of these technologies in this session if they do come up. So again, the history of RMAN, right? It's been 20 plus years, as you can see, starting with Oracle 8. These are just some of the features that we've introduced, and just to give you some food for thought and maybe stir up some questions for the chat, is that we started back with Oracle 8, 8i, 9i with very kind of base level functionality, doing parallelism for the backup and restore. We introduced duplicate in 9i, which is very effective to the cloning and restoring of the backups to another database server. Block media recovery, online mechanism to get a particular block or a set of blocks that are found to be corrupted within the database to be repaired very quickly. That was also a nice sort of online value feature from the RMAN side. Moving on to 10G and 11G in the sort of 2000s, mid-2000s area, we have the fast recovery area, fast incremental backups, incrementally updated backups. So the incrementally updated backups is a mechanism to take an image copy to disk backup location and then take your incrementals thereafter to essentially update or roll forward, if you will, those image copies. So this eliminates the need to take another full backup to disk, and you have a current copy that's always available, and that leads to the next point, which was switch to copy. This is a mechanism by which we can switch the database files to use the copy instead of the production files on the production storage location. The ASM disk group like data or just your local data file location, right? It's a very quick way to essentially do the restore instead of actually restoring all the data back from a backup. We also introduced the mechanism to offload your backups to the standby database. A lot of customers like to do this in their data garden environment. As you know, that backups can be taxing on your systems for large databases. It can take a lot of time, for example, and we found that customers can use a local standby to to offload, if you will, the backups, so that again the backups are physically interchangeable, can be used between primary and standby, and so this offloads the primary, yet still gives them complete recoverability from the backup locally, right? And so that data guard integration, if you will, was introduced around this time frame. Now, going into today's Oracle 12c and now 12c Release 2, in our upcoming 18C release, number of features here that we added, such as table level recovery, the cross-platform backup and recovery support that I mentioned before for a common use case. Customers need to move from one OS platform to another over time. We also had enhanced active duplicate. Active duplicate is a feature of duplicate command that allows you to create a clone database by simply connecting to the source database. So no longer do you need to take a backup. You simply connect to the source, and RMAN actually acts as the conduit to copy the files and put them and get them fixed up on the destination server side, right? And we can do this in parallel across multiple channels, et cetera. So it's a very nice way to create a clone database without having to take a backup first. We also have, as I said, the standby database synchronization, where you can take an incremental and catch a standby that's maybe behind very quickly. And also a multi-tenant support. You know, multi-tenant with 12C was a big sort of architecture feature introduction, if you will, into the database side. And this allows you to do what we call a container database, which can hold multiple pluggable databases. So you have individual databases within a larger container database, and we can back up that entire container database to hold, you know, which will contain all the data for those individual pluggable databases. You can then restore individual pluggable databases as needed. Basically a consolidation approach, right, for your database side, and to be able to then consolidate the backups very effectively, yet still get all the recovery features in RMAN at a pluggable database level. Okay, so the second part of this session will be on Flashback, and Flashback has been also around for a number of years, introduced first in 10G, and we have a number of individual operations, if you will, under the Flashback technology family. And so we have kind of two groups. One being is error investigation, which is on, you know, querying the data as of a point in time in the past. So we have commands such as flashback query to see what a table looked like as of time yesterday or 2 days ago. For example, this might be for auditing, for reporting, for any kind of or any issues that you see in the data itself, right? To see kind of compare the versions of the data over time. This is where flashback version query comes into very handy, where you can see kind of the changes in rows in a table between two different times in the past. And then we also have flashback transaction query, which is the ability to look at a transaction and history of a transaction ID and the rows that it affected over time. Okay, so it's kind of even more interesting, if you will, auditing method to see specific transaction details over time. Now, on the recovery aspect, so Flashback can also act on the data itself to rewind or to undo certain changes. And we do this with a number of operations. You see your Flashback table, which gives you back a version or a look of the table back to a point in time in the past. Flashback drop, you have customers actually connect to a production database as opposed to a test database, and they drop a set of tables that they were intending to do for retest kind of exercise. So Flashback drop enables the database to essentially move a table from the recycle bin back into the actual database, sort of the original database structure itself. Okay, so we have kind of a concept of recycle bin in the database. Flashback database operates on the entire database to rewind the entire database to a point in time in the past. And we do that through a different set of files, a new set of files we call flashback logs. These are kept in the fast recovery area, essentially logging sort of the before change images as changes occur. So we log these sort of block images in the flashback log files, and then we replay those. We search back into those flashback log files upon flashback database operations, so you can get back to a point in time in the past. And then we have flashback transactions. So DBMS flashback transaction backout allows you to take a specific transaction ID or a set of IDs and unwind those. Okay, you can unwind those, take a look, and then commit the changes if you really want to undo those. You can also cascade option, which allows you to allows all the dependent transactions to also be undone that are related to that transaction. So it's pretty flexible kind of recovery mechanism at a transaction level as well. So just another look at the commands themselves to do like flashback query, select star as of, kind of clause here. Flashback versions query has this select star versions between clause. And then flashback transaction query, we do select star from flashback transaction query keyword, and then you supply the transaction ID, and we'll give you a report essentially of all the changes that have been affected by that transaction on rows and whatever tables that were touched. And these queries are based on your undo. So as long as you size your undo for retention time that you want to do this query in the past, then we'll be able to service those requests. Okay. And then at the flashback error correction level, as I mentioned, we have flashback database, flashback table, flashback drop, and then flashback transaction backup. So it's a pretty rich set of features. This is very effective for human error, logical or application type of errors where you don't need to necessarily do a physical restore and recovery using a backup, but you have something caught maybe within the last few hours, the last day, and you want to just unwind those changes very quickly. All right, so with that said, I do see a number of chat questions that have already started coming up, and so we'll go ahead and start taking these, and we'll also highlight some of these on the audio as we go through. And yeah, Kelly and Marco, you can also get unmuted to highlight some of these questions as well, if you would like. So just taking a quick look at some of these questions now. Okay, I see a question about RMAN duplicate, okay, and then one about cleaning up archive logs. All right. So let's just go with that then, since we have this question already. It's about RMAN duplicate restore for OMF/ASM files. RMAN is skipping already restored OMF ASM files from a failed duplicated attempt. And then the question is, I thought that when a set new name is run, RMAN will come up with a new name for the data files. Okay, how is RMAN duplicate able to identify files from a previous failed duplicate and skip them even after a new control file is restored and set new name is executed after the duplicate is rerun? Okay, so that's a good question. There might be, and I see this is in 12.102. Okay, so that's also a more later release that we have. The set new name does work as you described, that that the set new name essentially redirects the names on the control file for the duplicated database for the location of where those files will go. Okay, and so if you have a set new name after a new control file is restored and set new name is executed after the duplicate is rerun, we should be able to pick up that set new name. Now, one of the things is that in that failed duplicate attempt, one thing that might be good to do is to clean up those files yourself. Okay, you can do you can have a new location specified, a new ASM disk group specified, for example. Try the set new name on that one and see if that goes through okay. But if the file name matches and you're using ASM unique ID files, right, we will skip those files that are already restored. And so it really depends on kind of what was the previous state, or what happened after that failed duplicate attempt. But I would expect that the set new name should allow those files to be redirected, if you will, to a new location. All right. So if you can try doing that with sending like a a new disk group, or basically a new location, maybe underneath the existing data disk group, but pointing to a brand new location with no files in there, and do a duplicate and see if that goes through, then there's probably some issue with the original file names themselves that have already been restored. That's the best I can get you to. If you want, you can also, obviously, we can follow with you offline after the session. Okay, we also have a question about what is the best and bug-free solution to clean up archive logs in the standby database? We have seen that RMAN archive log retention with FRA has some bugs in various versions. Do you still recommend scripting the cleanup as the safest? Okay. Right. So I'm not specifically aware of these bugs that you're speaking to. I mean, we've definitely fixed and improved things over time. This is the RMAN archive log retention setting with FRA. So this is probably the configure deletion policy for the archive logs. That's probably what you're referring to. But those configure settings should work as expected on both the primary and the standby database. For example, if you have a primary that's sending backups, primary going to a standby, and you're taking backups off of that standby database, for example, you want the log on the primary to be deleted when you have applied that, right? So you do a deletion policy of applied on standby on the primary database. Now on the standby, you would configure this to be archive log deletion policy to backed up, for example, backed up one time. And that would none of the delete commands or FRA cleanup commands would operate on that log until that backup has been done, okay, from the standby database side. Now, if you do backups on the primary and the standby, for example, then you could do a policy on the primary called, configure deletion policy to applied on standby, backed up one times, for example. What that means is that the deletion policy must be satisfied for both that it's been applied on the standby and that the log has been backed up on that particular database, which the configuration is set. So you would do that on the primary, and obviously on the standby, you would just set it to deletion policy to backed up, n times, for example, and that should take care of it. Right? So if you're not seeing that and you follow the doc, there's maybe something else going on, but there's something we can take this is not a call to do SR sort of triaging or kind of debugging, but certainly try that out, and again, following up afterwards. If there's still other questions about the functionality, let us know.
Yeah, Tim, this is Marco. This is a follow-up questions also on the duplicate.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Why don't we? This particular question, I think we should deal with this in an SR. Okay. And that's probably the best place to do this. The support can actually triage it properly versus just through our kind of session now that we don't have all the information available. But yeah, definitely follow an SR and follow there with that. But I do see your scenario where you're trying to convert the active standby database to a snapshot, complete the do the clone from that snapshot, and then put that snapshot back to a normal standby database, right? That should be that should work. Okay, that's my expectation. That should work. And then when you're saying the other case is the RMAN duplicate from active database, you have a failing active duplicate. Yep, we don't. This is going to be a support case that you have to take up. There's maybe some other configuration or initialization parameters or something else that's not set up properly there. Because you say there's a smaller database and it's working okay. Right, so please follow up with an SR on this one as well. Okay. Okay, great. So we do have, there's some questions from the product team that, we'd like to ask as well. keep chatting and keep asking your questions, but I think it's interesting for us to hear some feedback on your product usage and your environments. One question we'd like to ask is how many, if you can, in your chat, tell us number of databases that you have in your environment that are using RMAN, and whether they're using disk, tape, or a combination of both in your environments. If you could give us a little bit of data points there, it would help us to see kind of spectrum, if you will, of usage. Okay, thank you, Silver. And thank you, Sherv. Okay. Great. Yeah, ZDLRA is a very good topic. Next month, we'll have office hours on ZDLRA, and we can cover that more in depth there. Okay. Now, the other question we're interested in is kind of your top 3 challenges you have in your backup recovery environment. The top 3 pains or challenges that you deal with using RMAN, and something that give us a bit of data points on your uses as well. So top 3 challenges in your backup environment as well. Okay, thank you, Patrick. It's interesting to see the virtual disk or virtual tape libraries there as well being used, and along with physical tape. Okay, I have a question here from Sherv. FRA and NFS mounts, if you want to keep backup in FRA and NFS mounts for faster, what do you recommend? Okay. So I'm not sure exactly the question. If you're asking, you want to keep some backups for a short-term period, or faster recovery on the FRA, and then you want to keep a set of backups longer period and another in another location like NFS mount. So RMAN, sort of the RMAN design is to keep a backup for a database for a retention period, right? So you set up a retention to like 7 days or 30 days, and we keep those backups around, okay? And there's 2 device types that you have, disk, and you have SBT, and that's typically tape or third-party media, right? And so if you have your backups, there's no, if you will, there's no ability to have different retention periods for different sets of backups, okay, from a configurations perspective. We have customers who want to, say, delete certain backups after 30 days for databases, and they want to delete, for example, some backups on tape after a certain amount of days, right? There is a way through the RMAN delete obsolete command to say, I want to delete these backups on this channel, on the disk channel type, for example, that are older than 7 days recovery window, and I want to delete these backups that are older than 30 days on SBT, type of command. So you can actually have scripted delete certain backups from the totally on the disk side or on the SBT channel side, but you can't separate that out within a particular channel as you see here, right? So what I would recommend here is to look at potentially look at a like for ZDLRA, this is a sort of a engineered recovery appliance that does allow RMAN to back up to the appliance, and we do have retention sets on the recovery appliance for the disk backups, and then you also set retention, for example, on the tape side, right? So within the product, our ZDLRA product itself, you can have different retentions for one database. And then your second question, Sherv, is about, do you recommend recovery catalog database or control file should be sufficient? We typically recommend recovery catalog database as a best practice. Recovery catalog has been around for a number of years. Okay, it is a way to centralize or consolidate all your backup metadata or history into a single location, and it's in a database, so you can actually back it up. You can put data guard on it, so you can protect it through HA and outages and in that respect from one database server to a standby database for a server, for example. And so we typically will say use recovery catalog database if you have just a control file. You can use RMAN. You can have your backups and your history retained. However, you'll be limited by how many records that control file can hold. There's a parameter that we call control file keep record time, and if you decide you want a longer retention than that period, I think it's typically set for 7 days. That can increase the size of the control file considerably. Plus, the backup records and the backup records in the control file we call transient records. They can actually be recycled if non-transient records need to be created, such as data files, new data files added, such as archive logs, for example, recorded. These are non-transient files and can actually push out or recycle the backup. So you may actually lose backups, the older backup history, by using control file. With a recovery catalog database, you have no such limitation. You can go very, very high in terms of retention.
Yeah, another option, if you can add, Tim, for the previous question, can also be the cloud. So you can use the FRA for the quick recovery and local backups. You can do an image copy, for example. This is the same thing we use in our cloud database instances. We have a local image copy FRA kept for 7 days with incremental merge, and then longer 30-day retention are sent to object storage. You can do the same for on-premise. You can do an image copy to the local disk and then do a longer retention backup of that FRA image to the cloud.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. Yeah. All right, great. And we did get some other data points about some of our attendees' setups as well here, so that's definitely good to know. And we also have a question here about restarting failed duplicates. Is it safe to restart a failed duplicate by connecting to the auxiliary, completing recovery, opening database, realize upon failure, the DB ID and DB name are the same as production. And it will may corrupt the catalog. Okay, so Silver, on this question, again, if this is an actual issue, when you did do a restart, that should be followed up with an SR. The duplicate command was enhanced, and I believe there was either 11.2.0, maybe 11.2.04 or 12.1, where we put in restartability within the duplicate command itself. So restarting duplicate should not corrupt the catalog, and I understand that your concern is that the DB ID and DB name are the same as production. We shouldn't have, that shouldn't be the case. At the end, we do a NID where we create the new DB ID for the clone, and that is then registered into the catalog. So we shouldn't have a case where there's any corruption of the old backup entries, right? If you've seen this issue, that is obviously a serious issue and needs to be looked at through an SR. Also want to mention that in the past, customers have used, if it's a failed duplicate, they've been able to restart by doing RMAN restore. So being able to do the normal RMAN restore data files and be able to restore the rest of the data files, recover those data files, and to do the NID at the end. similar to what a duplicate would have done. So that's another option. Like I said, duplicate was enhanced with restartability in the 11.204 12c kind of release time frame. Okay, great. We have about 15 minutes left in this session. We welcome any other questions we have on the screen here, as you see. And also, if Kelly or Marco, do you have any other questions for the attendees at this point?
No, I may be interested in knowing if anyone is using the cloud storage as a backup target, just to have an idea if there's anyone that may be also interested in the next session.
Okay. Yeah, so please feedback on the chat if you're using backup service for your data, for any of your backups.
I think another interesting question would be if anybody is already using the recovery appliance.
Yes. Right. We have GE Healthcare. I see that Silver mentioned that they are using recovery appliance. Great. Okay. Okay. So with just the remaining time, as as we have, thinking of more questions or in your chat, I've asked Marco to give us a quick overview of 18C RMAN new features. 18C is to be announced and released very shortly. And so I think it might be interesting for you to see kind of what we have, what we've done, and will be available in 18C.
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide, Tim? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. So so 18C, which is basically I think today GA is released officially on Exadata, right? Had some interesting features and RMAN, new features in RMAN, and specifically in these are the areas that you see here. So enhancements around multi-tenant databases, duplications for data guard, and the support of cloud archive storage, right? So there are two different types of archive storage in the Oracle Cloud. One is the standard object storage, and there is the archive storage for a longer retention. Currently, we only support object storage. With 18C, we're introducing support for the cloud archive, which is for longer retention. It's a lower cost storage on a price per terabyte basis, but it's a slower restore, if you want. There is a 4-hour delay to get it back. I'm covering this now because we don't have a slide now specifically on these. If you're interested in these topics, you can come, as Tim mentioned, to the April office hours, and we'll cover more details around this. Can I go to the next slide? Yeah. Okay. So around multi-tenant databases, the new feature 18C is the basically preservation of the backup history. So when you restore a PDB that from a backup that was taken either as a non-multi-tenant database, so before you convert a non-multi-tenant database in a PDB actually, or when the PDB was plugged on a different container database, right? And you moved it after the backup, right? You can go ahead with the topic slide. What happens today is that the history is lost. Okay, you cannot restore from a backup taken when a database was non-multi-tenant after it's converted into a PDB. Now, with 18C, this is preserved, so you will be able to restore a PDB into either different CDB or a new CDB. You need to use the XML data that is generated from the unplug operation, if it's from one CDB to another, okay? Or then there is this procedure that can be used to generate also this data if the database was not a multi-tenant database. And the new command is what you see in the example here, right? You can do restore pluggable database PDB name from pre-plugin backup. Okay, and that's the new feature, and obviously you can recover and then open it. Okay, so can you go ahead, Tim, please? Okay, active cross CDB PDB duplication. That's also new, obviously. So you can do an active duplication of a PDB between different containers. Okay, can you go ahead? See the example command. You start RMAN, okay, connect to the root of the source database as target, and then connect to the auxiliary instance. And then you can use this new duplicate pluggable from active database. Oops, go back 1 second. Okay. Duplicate pluggable database and PDB name to the new CDB from active database. Okay. And that will allow you to duplicate directly from one CDB to another. Can you go to the next? I think it's probably the last one, and it's a new recover standby database from service for DataGuard. It's a one single command to refresh the standby. Everything is refreshed, control file, data file, and in case there are new data files that are being added, they are restored. Okay. And with a single command, you start RMAN when connected to as target to the physical standby database, and then go next. You run this command, recover standby database from service, and you give the primary DB name, and this will basically roll forward your physical standby on, yeah, basically one single step. Everything is done without the need of backing up, restoring, etc. Okay, so that's also new. And yeah, I think that's all we have right now.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. So yeah, so this last note was automating what I described before about catching up a standby using an RMAN incremental. This is basically automated with one command now. And so it's, you know, you don't need to find the SCN that's needed, et cetera, for the incremental parent. And you can simply run this command. It'll catch up with the most recent data from the primary. Okay, so we're going to take any other questions on the chat and give it a couple of minutes, and if not, we'll just close the session then. Now, the one thing I do want to note too is for the pluggable database feature, we do have a Flashback pluggable database that was introduced in 12 release 2. Okay, so we can do individual Flashback pluggable databases within a larger container database. Right? So please look at that as well as you survey the Flashback technologies. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions at this moment, and so I'm going to be closing the office hours at this time. Thank you again for attending. We hope this was informative to you. Please join us next week. We're going to be focusing on zero data loss recovery appliance, and bring your questions for that, as well as any other backup recovery questions that you have. And we thank you so much for attending.